Shalom, my name is Eliav, and today I will be recording a video about love. Um, of course, we know the basics about love, what people don't know is that the Torah, the entire Torah, is based off love. A lot of people might not know that the Old Testament in the Bible has a lot of information regarding love and about guarding your heart and how to love in a greater way. If you struggle with loving others, or if you struggle with judging others, I really recommend you watching this video until the end. It will truly bless you. I know it will. Because it's important that we address how to love as believers. Many people, they believe in Jesus, they believe in God, but they believe in Yahushua, but do they really love? Do they really have that love? And when they see their brothers and sisters, how do they react in their hearts towards them? So the book of Deuteronomy is actually one of the first 5 books in the Bible, and it is a part of God's Torah. And in this book, he talks about loving him, which is very important, one of the most important commands. And even to this day, that verse and that commandment to love God is one of the most important. So Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5, and it says, you must love Yahweh, your God, with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And the book of Leviticus is actually the 3rd book in the Bible. All right, so Leviticus is the 3rd book in the Bible, and it actually talks about the burnt offerings. And one of those burnt offerings was the burnt offering of the birds. God's people would give him an offering, and one of those offerings was a bird. And when you do a bird offering with the birds, it requires you to cut the bird's head off to drain the blood. The book of Leviticus actually teaches us how to keep our hearts clean. It gives us a very detailed mystery. It gives us a mystery about the heart and how we can guard the heart and keep evil spirits away from our hearts. Now, if you read Leviticus chapter 1, God's people will give him a burnt offering. And one of those offerings required them to cut the head off the bird, drain the blood off the bird, and they will also skin the bird, skin his feathers. All right. So what I learned over the years is that those burnt offerings in the Torah, they actually have much more meaning than just a burnt offering. It is about deliverance. All right. So when they would cut the head off the bird, it's just a physical representation of the spiritual realm. When there's sin in the heart, it's important that you find out how you can remove that sin from your hearts. And in order for you to do that, you have to get to the root of that sin. When they would cut the head actually represents the stronghold of the spirit, the stronghold of sin. Of course, now we don't do sacrifices of animals. That was in the Old Testament. But however, during that time, when they would cut the head off the animals, today that representation, that was a representation of the head of those demons, the head of the principalities that was fighting in the hearts. All right. And the reason why the bird offerings representation was a representation of an offering from your heart, an offering of the sin that's in your heart. All right. And in this video, you can see that if you open the birds in half, if you split it in half, it is the exact shape of a human heart. You can fit a human heart inside of the ribs of the bird. All right. So it's made in the exact same format. Is in the same shape, actually. So it's made in the same shape. The human heart and the rib cage of a bird is in the exact same shape. All right. So when they would do these bird offerings, it was really a representation of them giving an offering to God because of the sin that was in their heart and the sin that was in the heart of their people. And when they would cut the head off the animals and they would cut the head off the birds, that was a representation of them cutting the strong man, the stronghold of that sin, you know. That was the reason why they did these things. They was very strategic. They was very detailed in the way that they sacrificed, you know, these animals in the Torah. All right, so they would cut the head, they would drain the blood, and they would pluck the feathers. Cutting the head off is you're identifying what's the root of your sin, what's the root of the problem in your heart. All right, you don't just say, okay, I have jealousy. Okay, you find out the reason for jealousy. Or if you have hatred in your heart, you find out the root of the hatred, and it could be hidden behind jealousy. You know, this is just an example. All right, so you always examine your hearts, find out what is the root behind that sin in your heart. Second is when they would drain the blood from those chickens. The blood was a representation of life. You know, the Bible tells us that blood represents the life. The life is in the blood. The blood was a representation of whatever is feeding the sin. Whatever is feeding the sin in your heart, find out what's feeding the sin. Don't just look at the sin, but find out what's feeding your sin. It could be insecurity that's feeding the sin in your heart. All right, so in order to attack the sin that's in your heart, you must first attack what's feeding the sin, okay? And also, what is the stronghold behind that sin in the heart? And we also must find out how to pluck the feathers. And when you pluck the feathers, you basically exposing it, making it pretty much raw, like exposed. All right, nothing covering it up, no feathers, nothing that will cover up the sin in your heart, okay? And when you expose, whenever you expose sin that's in your heart, it is just like in ancient times where they would expose the chicken. They would remove the feathers off that chicken. So I just want to say that it's important that as believers, we don't just attack the sin that's in our hearts. We attack whatever it is that's keeping us from being transparent. Like Adam, he hid himself in the garden after he sinned. He hid from Abba Yahweh. And it's important that we don't hide from Abba Yahweh, that we be transparent with our hearts and give our hearts totally to him, so that he can remove the sin from our hearts and that he can teach us how to guard our hearts. In many parts in the scriptures, Abba Yahweh talks about selfless love and walking in humility. In Matthew 23, verses 11 to 12, it is written, "But the greatest among you shall be your servant, and whoever exalts himself shall be humbled, and whoever humbles himself shall be exalted." If you walk in love, humility, and transparency, you will be more likely vulnerable to the attacks of the enemy, of course. And for some people, it's hard for them to walk in love and humility and transparency because they feel like if they're humbled or if they're transparent, that they may be taken advantage of. And if they're walking in humility, they feel like that they may be taken advantage of. But scriptures actually tell us that even among the wolves, even if we are surrounded with wolves, it's important that we still remain humility. In Matthew 10:16, Yahushua says, "See, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. But beware of men, for they shall deliver you up to the Sanhedrins and flog you in their synagogues." So in this verse, it shows that even if we are among our enemies, even if we are among the wolves, he still expects us to behave as doves. He still expects us to behave as sheep. And no matter where we are, it's important that we do not repay evil with evil. But instead, Yahushua calls us to pray for our enemies. In Matthew 5:5, Yahushua actually gives an encouraging word for those who are meek, for those who stay humble and walk in humility. And he says, "How blessed are those who are destitute in spirit, because the kingdom from heaven belongs to them. How blessed are those who mourn, because it is they who will be comforted. How blessed are those who are humble, because it is they who will inherit the earth. How blessed are those who are hungry and thirsty for righteousness, because it is they who will be satisfied. How blessed are those who are merciful, because it is they who will receive mercy. How blessed are those who are pure in heart, because it is they who will see God. How blessed are those who make peace, because it is they who will be called God's children. How blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, because the kingdom from heaven belongs to them. How blessed are you whenever people insult you, persecute you, and say all sorts of evil things against you falsely because of me. Rejoice. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, because your reward in heaven is great. That's how they persecuted the prophets who came before you. You are the salt of the world, but if the salt shall lose its taste, how can it be made salty again? It's good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled on by people. And the last part about how Yahweh throws out those who lose their saltiness. Those are our enemies, So just continue to stay humbled. I leave these words with you. Yahushua leaves these words of hope and comfort to us, so that we can continue to stay humbled. We can continue to walk in love, no matter what comes against us. Because your enemies, they will be thrown out and trampled underfoot. Those are our enemies, okay? And never repay evil for evil. This is important about love. Love never repays evil for evil. 1 Corinthians 13 verse 4, love is patient, love is kind, love does not envy, love does not boast, is not puffed up, it does not behave indecently, does not seek its own, is not provoked, reckons not the evil, does not rejoice over the unrighteous, but rejoices in the truth. Love covers all, believes all, expects all, endures all. Love never fails. And whether prophecy, they shall be inactive, or tongues, they shall cease, or knowledge, they shall be inactive. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect has come, then that which is in part shall be inactive. So all these things are a reminder of how to stay in humility and how to guard your hearts, even when you are in an environment or a situation where you feel as if you should repay with evil, or you feel as if you should retaliate. But those times we don't retaliate. In those times we are like sheep led to slaughter. In Yahushua, when he was led to the cross, he didn't retaliate. He could have fought back, but he didn't. He did it all for us. He chose to be that sacrificial lamb for us. In that same way, we choose to give our life for him. That same way. It's so easy to defend ourselves, but when we guard our heart, it protects us. It protects our spiritual pipes. It protects our spiritual growth. It protects our spirit. So that's why it's important to guard the heart, okay? And I just leave these words of blessing and encouragement in Yahushua's name. Much love and shalom.